Okay, so in this next video, we're going to do pretty much the same things, but we're just going to introduce squaring and square rooting. So that's just some extra operations we're going to be looking at. Now remember that the inverse of squaring is square rooting and vice versa. So if you have something that is being squared, to get rid of the squaring, you do square rooting. If you have something that is being square rooted, to get rid of the square rooting, you do squaring, because those are the inverse operations. So I'm just going to do these 4 examples, and these first 2 look really similar to each other, and then these second 2 look really similar to each other, and we're going to try and work out why they're different. So we're going to try and make A the subject this time. So we wanted to end up as an A equals. So in this first one that we've got here, to get A squared by itself, that's what I'm going to need to do before I get A by itself. I'm going to do the opposite of the minus 4, which is plus 4. So I get x plus 4 is equal to A squared. And now that I've got to this stage, I'm going to do the inverse to get A by itself. So I'm at this point going to do the square root. Now if I do the square root on this side, I have to make sure that I also do the square root on that side. So I'm going to do the square root to get it become A. And then when I do the square root, I don't want to just do a little square root here and a little square root here. That won't work. What you need to do is square root the whole thing so that it's written as the square root of x plus 4. Now, technically, when you take the square root, you do get the positive and negative version of it. So you get that A equals the positive and negative square root of x plus 4. But if you just wrote this line here, it would be fine as well. That's because when you take the square root of a number, I don't know, like when you take the square root of 64, you do get the positive and negative 8, because positive 8 times positive 8 is 64, but so is negative 8 times negative 8. So technically, you're meant to put this at the beginning, but if you don't worry about it too much. So how is this one different? Well, this time we added the 4 and then we square rooted, but this one the square root is applying to the whole thing. So the first step we're going to do is we're going to square root this side to get rid of the squaring, which means I square root this side to get the square root of x. And again, that would be a plus or minus if we were being really fussy here, but don't worry too much. Now to get rid of that minus 4, I'm going to add it to the other side. So it is going to be the plus or minus square root of x, and the opposite of minus 4 is plus 4. So look subtly how different these are. This square root sign went all the way across. This square root sign only applies to the x. Like I said, if you didn't put that plus minus at the beginning, it's still going to be okay. Okay, so this time you can see it's more similar to this first example. The first thing I'm going to do is add the 4 because the square root is only applying to the a. And then I need to do the inverse of square rooting, which is squaring. Now, if you just do x squared plus 4 squared, that is not how you square it. You have to square the whole side. So it is x plus 4 squared. And that is equal to a. The reason that happens is when you square things, you can't just square each individual part. You have to square them added first. And that's because if you add something and then square it, you get a different result from squaring it first and then adding it. So here's our answer here, and here, and here. And then the last one looks really similar, but it's ever so slightly different. The first thing you'll notice is the square root sign goes all the way across. So that means you're going to square immediately to get rid of the square root sign. And then I'm going to add the 4 afterwards. So you'll notice it looks different to this one, the third one. The third one, it is x plus 4 all squared, whereas this one, it is x squared plus 4. And if you tried that with numbers, you'd often find that they give you different things. So I have got 4 questions here that have square root signs in. Maybe they're a little bit easier, maybe they're a little bit harder. I want you to see if you can make x the subject of these 4 questions. Okay, so pause the video and have a go, but if you are watching, we're just going to keep going with this part. So that negative n, I'm going to add it to the other side. So m plus n equals the square root of x. Now the opposite of square rooting is squaring, so I'm going to have to square this whole side, m plus n, all squared. You can't square the parts individually. Now question 2, I need to get x as the subject, so I'm going to first of all multiply by n, so mn equals the square root of x, and then I'm going to do the squaring part. Now when I do the squaring part, I'm going to square the whole thing with brackets, so that you get this. So you get mn all squared. Now there is an alternative way that you could write that. You could, because it's a multiplication, you can now apply the squared to both parts. You can say that it's m squared n squared equals x. Notice how this is different to this. This one you can't square them both individually. This one, you can square them both individually because this is a product, two things multiplied, and this is two things being added. I think I explained that in the solving equations playlist, so hopefully that will have, if you've watched that, that will have cleared it up for you as well. Okay, number 3, I'm going to try and make x squared the subject. So I'm going to first of all subtract the n so that I get p minus n. And then I'm going to divide by the m because the squaring only applies to the x. It's not applying to the m. So I want to get rid of that m first of all by dividing by m. So that is p minus n divided by m. And now to get rid of the squaring, the last step is to do the square root. And notice how I've drawn a really big square root sign because I want it to apply to this and to this. And technically you want the plus minus at the beginning, but like I said before, if you don't have the plus minus, you're not going to be penalized. So I'm just highlighting the answers. I probably should have highlighted them in a different color to not confuse with this bit, but that's fine. I'm going to just leave it. Okay, so I'm going to make x the subject of this one. So I'm going to start off by subtracting p. So you get q minus p. And then I'm going to divide by 3, same thing, the x is being squared and then multiplied by 3, so that means I'm going to divide by 3 first. So it's q minus p divided by 3, and then I'm going to do the square root of q minus p divided by 3, and again there should be a plus minus at the start. Okay, so that's the end of that video, and in the next one we're going to be looking at equations that include brackets. Found this video helpful? Then why not drop it a like and consider subscribing to my channel. If you'd like the next video in the playlist, you can click here to be taken straight to it. And as always, wishing you the very best for all your studies.